Thumbs up if he's watching us. That answers that question. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moscow Board of Adjustments meeting for April 25th, 2024. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was actually just an approval of actual meeting minutes. I read through them. I didn't even see any scriveners. Does anybody have any comments or corrections or clarifications for?
I move that we approve the minutes from the January 17, 2024 meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? It approves unanimously. Our second order of business was eliminated, so we do not have the variance on Lily Street this evening, which means we get to the 1515 North Mountain View property.
Good evening, board members and members of the public. Tonight, we have a CUP amendment proposed for 1515 South Mountain View. The proposals for conditional use permit to exceed the maximum building height for the proposed school buildings within an R2 zone in the city of Moscow. The second proposal that you will hear tonight is an amendment to an existing conditional use permit for a church and school facility that was approved on August 2nd, 2016 and amended November 17th of 2021 in the same location, 1515 North Mountain View, within the same zoning designation, R2. The applicant is proposing to amend the school design that was approved as a part of the conditional use permit application and also amend the phasing plan. I'm sure you're all familiar with the site out at just out at the east side of the city limits, off of Mountain View, adjacent to Mountain View Park, highlighted there in red. To provide a little bit of background, this initial proposal for a conditional use permit was done back in June of 2006. They applied for a conditional use permit for a church and a school and a variance from the maximum building height. A private school campus was going to include a school, a gymnasium building, a church building to be used for services and assemblies, playgrounds, outdoor courtyard, a track, athletic field, a detention pond, open space, and parking lots to serve the uses. The church and school were proposed to exceed the 35-foot maximum height limit by 11 feet for a total of 46 feet. The development was approved to be completed in 3 phases at that time. Phase 1 included the public street improvements necessary to mitigate impacts generated by the increased traffic demand as a result of the development, including construction of a new north-southbound street that would provide the direct access to the school. Also included in Phase 1 is the installation of necessary utilities, vehicle circulation within the site, including parking for approximately 120 vehicles and a track and field. Phase 2 would include construction of the school building containing classrooms, offices, and assembly space. And then the third phase of the project would include adding a regulation-sized gym to the east side of the school building, constructing the chapel, and adding additional parking areas to accommodate the uses and special event parking on the site. The application for the conditional use permit was approved with 7 conditions, and the variance to exceed the maximum building height by 11 feet was approved with no conditions. On September 9th of 2021, as some of you might recall, Logos School submitted a request to amend the phasing plan. At that time, the applicant proposed an alternate phasing plan due to lack of funding to build the school at the time as a part of Phase 2. The applicant proposed the amending to the phasing plan as follows. Phase 1 included the public street improvements as before necessary to support demand as a result of the development. This included, again, the construction of the public street and installation of the public improvements and utilities as described in Phase 1 of the original phasing plan. That work has begun. Phase 2 included construction of a fellowship building and parking areas to accommodate the use. The fellowship hall would contain an assembly space, commercial kitchen, and restrooms. The fellowship building will be built while Phase 1 is being completed. And then in Phase 3, it included the school buildings, a regulation-sized gym to the east side of the school building, construction of the church, the administrative building, chapel, the pedestrian bridge on the south corner of the property, and additional parking to accommodate the added uses of the special event parking. The order of those components were going to be based on funding. That amendment was approved on November 17th of 2021, and Phase 1 and Phase 2 were approved to be constructed concurrently. This work is currently underway. This is the approved phasing plan, as you might recall from the 2021 application. As you can see, the green is Phase 1. That includes the road infrastructure, the utilities, the access around the track, around the school. Phase 2 contained the fellowship hall and all the parking is shown in blue. And Phase 3 is everything shown in red. So the additional parking at the rear, the remainder of the church campus, as well as the school campus. This is the school design as it is currently approved. These are the elevations of the current school approval building, and from the north and the west. This is the floor plan of the approved school building. As you can see, it is just one building, 2 stories, but all of it is enclosed in one building. So that brings us to tonight's current proposal. The applicant is proposing to amend the existing conditional use permit for the school and the church. The applicant's requesting to exceed the maximum building height of the redesigned school buildings. The new school campus and building design consists of 6 buildings ranging in height from 37 feet 11 inches to 44 feet 3 inches. The proposed redesign of the school building is consistent with the maximum building height, which was concurrently approved through the variance process. Since the new school building design is substantially different from the original proposal, the building height variance is no longer valid. Since the time of the original approval, the zoning code has been amended to allow building height to be exceeded through the CUP process rather than a variance. Therefore, the applicant is proposing a CUP to exceed the maximum building height in the R2 zone, which is 35 feet. Just a quick side note on building height, it's measured from grade and at the average of both sides of the building. The design of the original school building was one large building. Logos Schools redesigned the school into numerous buildings in order to construct buildings within the campus as funding becomes available. The applicant is proposing the school campus phasing as follows. Phase 1, and this is all within Phase 3 of the overall project. So this is the phasing of just the school campus. Phase 1 includes 2 academic buildings, the multipurpose gym and playfield restrooms. The playfield restrooms shall be operational prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy for the multipurpose gym. Phase 2 would include 1 academic building, in the finishing of the multipurpose gym, the administration building, the track and the pedestrian bridge. The pedestrian bridge shall be operational prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy for Phase 2. And then within Phase 3, 1 academic building, the pavilion, and the competition gym. This is kind of a visual representation of what we just went over. Anything with a blue dot would be completed in Phase 1. Phase 2 is anything with a yellow dot, and Phase 3 would be concurrent with the green dot. So as you can see, you've got the administration building here. This is the gym, or the auditorium gym here. These are the 4 academic buildings, and this is the pavilion. Again, this is the phasing plan that was originally proposed. There's very slight modification to the site overall, with the exception of some parking here on the north side of the school, on the north side of the school section, and then the school design itself. This is the floor plan of the overall school. So you've got, like we talked about, the administration building here, the 4 academic buildings, the auditorium, and the gymnasium. This is the administrative building floor plan, contains various offices and administrative staff. This is the administration building elevation. As you can see, it sits at 41 feet 11 inches. This is from the rear and the side. Academic building floor plans, as you can see, each academic building contains a number of classrooms for either middle school or high school with restroom facilities. Overall elevation from the front of the building for the academic buildings at 44 feet, 3 inches, 3 3/8 inches. This is from the rear and sides of the same building. Gymnasium and auditorium floor plan, as you can see, the auditorium is on the right and the gymnasium on the left, one under one building, second floor of the same building, and the overall elevations of the front and side and rear, and the overall school campus. Current parking requirements for kindergarten, elementary, and junior high. The current standards require 2 spaces per classroom plus 1 space for every 8 seats in large assembly areas. High schools require 5 spaces per classroom plus 1 space for every 8 seats in large assembly areas. Churches require 1 space per 4 seats or 100 inches of bench seating plus 1 space per square feet of open assembly area. The total requirement for the Fellowship Hall currently under construction is 248 spaces. The total requirement for the school upon completion is 340 spaces. Parking for the entire site completed in phase 1 would achieve 112 spaces. Phase 2, an additional 209 spaces. In phase 3, an additional 179 spaces. For a total of phase 1 and 2, it would be 321 spaces. So as the school begins construction, there would be 321 spaces available, with a total of 500 parking spaces shown upon completion. As construction of the school begins in phase 3, additional parking will be provided upon demand of the buildings constructed. In total, 500 spaces shall be shared between the entire campus at completion. So again, this is just a visual representation of the same thing. As you can see, there's a number of spaces here in phase 1, 112 to be exact. In phase 2 here in blue, there are 179 spaces. And then in phase 3, I did that backwards, 209 spaces here in blue and 179 spaces here in red, for a total of 500 spaces. The zoning code allows for a joint use parking, provided that there is no substantial conflict between principal operating hours of the building structure or the uses in the joint use parking agreement. Up to 100% of the parking spaces and/or lots required by the zoning code for a church may be supplied by off-street parking spaces and/or lots provided by uses primarily of a daytime nature. So since the school would qualify as a daytime use, the applicant is eligible for a joint use parking provision of the zoning code. The applicant will need to enter into that joint use agreement before permits can be issued for phase 3. So tonight's recommendation and order of operations would be that staff would recommend the board conduct the public hearing for the proposed conditional use permit. Upon consideration of any testimony received, approve the proposed CUP to exceed the maximum building height with no conditions. And if the CUP to exceed the maximum building height is approved, approve the proposed amendment to the existing CUP for school design and phasing with no conditions. And then in accordance with the board's decision on the proposed CUP to exceed maximum building height and amendment of the existing CUP of the school design and phasing, direct staff to prepare reasoned statement of relevant criteria and standards document. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions you might have.
I have a question, just for clarification.
Sure.
We need to do item 1 kind of separately and then actually have a vote and determine yay or nay on that, and then start the second CUP as a completely different item.
Correct.
There isn't a huge crowd here, so do you still need me to open and close, have board deliberation, and then open and close for the second one?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
okay. Questions for staff?
I don't.
I have a question with regards to the parking lot that is on the southern border, which is relatively close to the property line. As part of the parking design, is a landscape buffer required to the adjacent property, which is a field right now, but is that part of the standards they would have to?
There is a 3-foot landscape buffer required on any parking lot that contains more than 5 spaces. So there would be a 3-foot buffer required there, yes.
Okay, so we don't have to ask or make any condition related to
that is a
That's just
requirement.
part of the standard. Okay. And then the second clarification I had, because I was in the group in 2016, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Totally forgot what I was going to say. Guess it wasn't that big of a deal. Any other questions for Steph? Oh, I remember what it was. The original variance that was approved for height actually exceeded what they're asking for now, correct? Okay, that's,
I wasn't able to ascertain, based on the material presented, which buildings exactly are going to exceed the height variant.
So all of them do. The maximum height in R2 is 35 feet. Going back to the elevation slides here, as you can see, the gymnasium sits at 36 feet, 11 inches, so that would exceed it by almost 2 feet. The academic building sits at 44 feet, 3 inches, so that would exceed that by almost 10 feet, 9 feet, 3 inches. And then the academic or the administration building sits at 41 feet, 11 inches, so that would exceed it by just under 7 feet.
Is there no inclusion of the church in these plans that we were given?
No, the proposal tonight is to amend the design for the school phasing. The fellowship hall is currently already under construction. When they do propose a chapel, if it is to exceed the maximum building height, that would come before you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have one other question. In terms of the height above variance being requested, the elevations make it look like the gym has a solid wall, and the very last slide makes it look like it has a gabled roof. Do we know which it is?
Let's take a look.
If you go to the very last slide,
Oops.
that looks like a pitched roof rather than a tall wall that is up at 42.
Yeah. And I think maybe the applicants can speak to this a little bit
Okay.
better. This looks more like a 3D simulated visual rather than actual architectural drawings. So you can see here how the pitched roof is in the front. It does appear that in the rear, it is just straight. So if you compare that kind of to, oops, I'm going the wrong direction, to the front, you can kind of see there's a breezeway between the two that connects them,
Which
would,
shows the gable also. That's why I was wondering.
Right.
Okay. Any more questions for staff?
Not me.
All right.
okay. So I'm just going to get to the end with the relevant criterion standards for you. So that's on the screen. There you go.
Perfect. Well, with that, I open up the hearing for public testimony. So if one of the three of you would like to come up and present this, we'll actually have to do this twice. So I guess comments right now, we'll try to keep towards the height variance.
We ask the applicant first?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought-
Yeah, the applicant gets to go first, and then depending on which three sides of the coin you three gentlemen are on, we'll have comments for and comments against or neutral, and then the applicant, whichever one of you that ends up being, can rebut those, but I think this is going to go a little bit more streamlined than I was anticipating that it would be.
I think you would be fine to open the public hearing, discuss both matters, but have two votes. Vote on the height first and then vote on.
So
the
that we don't
amendment
have to do
second.
this twice? Okay.
Yes.
That
So
would,
that it all can kind of be discussed concurrently. As we listed on the agenda, it is one public hearing, but for two action items.
okay.
So that would be fine.
That was the response I was hoping to hear. Thank you. So that said, if one of you would like to come up and explain where you're coming from on the height and the rephasing, and go from there. And state your name and address in the mic for the record.
My name is Matt Whitling. I'm the superintendent at Logos School. My address is 1017 North Alman. And thank you for hearing this tonight. The primary motivation for the change of design was three things. The first one is that we wanted something that was feasible versus one monolithic building that's kind of everything or nothing. And so this design appealed to us because of that. The other thing that we were attracted by was that we think it's more beautiful. And so even the size of the architecture is a little more human and a little less like a Walmart or a Home Depot. And then the last thing that we liked about the design was that we thought we could build it locally versus needing to bring an outfit from Spokane or Coeur d'Alene to do that. So that's kind of the general tact on it. As far as height, the only thing that I would ask is on the gym, and the question was good, is it a gabled or is it a flat roof? We are still comparing tilt-up versus steel frame construction. And if it was tilt-up, it would be a flat roof. If it was steel framed, a gable would make more sense. And so our request was, we were hoping to have the same height variance that was granted in 2021, so that we've got a little wiggle room in order to make sure that volleyballs aren't hitting the ceiling, depending on the design that we have. Everything else was right on the money.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? You answered my question. I wasn't sure because that was a mass model at the beginning. I didn't know if that happened at the beginning or the end, and
That was an earlier one.
yeah, that explains why. I know how that works.
Sorry, I know I'm paid to ask questions, but I don't have any.
You're getting paid. I'm missing the boat. What's going on here? This was all pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah.
I guess that's all we need.
So we're really still working in phase 2, and we're looking towards phase 3, but we're not really, you're not really doing any construction for phase 3 right yet.
That's right. And there are still some things from phase 1 that need to be complete before occupancy, even for the fellowship hall, would be granted. And so we are affectionately calling one of those pieces the staple-shaped drive that goes around the school building. So if you can picture Logos Street that runs right along Mountain View Park, the boundary of Mountain View Park, we need to pave a staple-shaped drive and parking area as part of phase 1. And that's what our intentions are, is before we start building any part of the school to do that.
Okay. Because it says in the zoning code that the applicant will need to enter into a joint use parking agreement for the different joint use of the facility before permits are issued for phase 3, and we're not there yet. You're not heading into, all we're trying to do is get the approval of the buildings and the change in your oversight and in your overview of your facilities. And I really don't know from, I guess, the proposed development is also supposed to have widening of Mountain View Road, and I don't know when that all comes into play too. Is that because the school's not there yet? So I don't anticipate that you would have to do it, but probably before occupancy is given to you for the school.
The public improvements along Mountain View are required as a part of phase 1. So they'll need to complete those before permits can be issued. Or there'll have to be an amendment of the development agreement that they entered into.
And as a point of clarification, if I remember this correctly, they were allowed in 21 that phase 1 and phase 2 could occur concurrently.
Correct.
So they didn't have to necessarily finish all that road construction
before construction of the chapel,
Gotcha.
correct?
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure where it fits in 3. And so
Right. So it sounds like 1 and 2 happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
And then 3 is independent after.
That's correct.
And 3 itself sounds like as you get funding, you'll add the individual sections of the academic
Right.
aspect of it. Okay.
Makes sense.
Any other questions? Tim?
No.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
So with that, the other two in our audience can get up and speak in favor or against or neutral
Or not.
or not. No comments? All right. Going once. All right, we'll close the public hearing. And as a board, we'll deliberate on this. So we need to treat this as a motion and a second and a vote regarding height. And then we'll deal with the phasing proposed change as a second thing, pending approval of the first. So before we hear any motions, any comments?
Well, we've already approved once before the height when it was a variance. And I don't see any reason not to approve it again.
I agree. And I've actually been on the board since long enough when this started. And so honestly, the amount of roof now above the variance that was approved in the past is actually less. And the amount of massing on the site is actually less. So this, in our conditions, how does it play in with the neighborhood and the surroundings? This is actually a by far more accommodating than the original design was. So to me, this seems like a slam dunk. It's straightforward, it's cost effective, and it's less intrusive on the surrounding parcels.
And it's more beneficial for them to do it as they get funds for the different buildings, as they
Yeah.
have the opportunity to complete them.
Ivy, thoughts?
I got nothing to
Yeah,
add.
on that?
So I'd move to approve the proposed CUP for maximum building height up to 46 feet for school buildings located at 1515 North Mountain View Road with no conditions.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion. I have a second. We'll go down the row. Tim?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Ivy?
Aye.
Aye as well. So that's unanimous. So the variance for the height is approved, which means now the conditional use for the proposed phasing change is the next topic of discussion. And again, I think that the phasing makes sense. It's not really that anything changed other than phase 3 just will become phase 3A, B, C, D
Yeah.
as they go through it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial for them, and I don't think there's any detriment to the program at all. So
So do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit for changing the phasing of the approved school to do it in the proposed phases that they have presented.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
A motion, I have a second.
Will you add to that also the proposed change to the school design as well as the phasing plan? Since we're changing it into multiple buildings rather than the one.
Yeah, the school building design plan as well as the
Okay,
phasing of the construction.
so we'll retract the second. And now do I have a second based on the revised
Second?
wording of the first? So same thing. We have a motion. We have a second. Tim?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Ivy?
Aye.
I as well. So
Do we have to move to, I forgot to add to direct the staff to prepare a reason statement.
nope, they actually asked us to do that separately at the end.
Oh,
So,
oh.
so honestly, I'd like to make that motion, according to staff's recommendation to make the relevant criteria and findings of fact for both of these for our review and approval. So I made a motion. Woo-hoo.
Second?
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? There we go. Done.
I move we adjourn.
Fair enough. Before I accept a second, do we have any meeting things to decide on, or has that been clarified
think
by
we're-
email for the next one?
I think we're good. Next meeting should be April 30th at 7 PM here in council chambers, so next Tuesday.
Okay. So I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There is no one. They can stay here by themselves. Thank you.
Nobody in the crowd.